Nah, it's just a myth. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you said it? It's just a myth. That statement is so dismissive. In our modern world, the word myth is so often used as a synonym for fallacy, something that isn't true. But that's not what the word actually means. Stay tuned and we'll look into what it does actually mean. Well, good evening. I'm Jack Cox, author of Love Not Fear.
I have his book here and it's wonderful.
And I'm with my gorgeous co-host Annie Day, who's written two scrumptious books.
Orgasmic Health and Your Guide to Feeling Fabulous Fast.
And Barnabas, who's written
All you need is love.
It's love. La 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 la. All you
All
need
you need
is
is
love.
love. Da 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 da. All you need is love. Love. Love is all you need.
Yay.
You can't sing in unison on what the world needs now is love, sweet love.
Love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. I think we're doing great. Considering it doesn't really like you to sing, and it doesn't really like you to do sounds, does it? As we found with the sound healing.
Oh, that was crazy, that wasn't it?
Wasn't it? Yeah. You can see me doing it, but then there was no noise coming out. But Jack found a way around it, didn't you? So it was all good.
So, what is a myth? Another word for myth that we often hear is parable. Jesus, we are taught in parables. Maybe there really was a good Samaritan, and maybe there wasn't. It doesn't really matter. Jesus was telling us a story, a myth, to put across the idea that bigotry is wrong and that people of different religions can all be good people too. Something many modern Christians could well do with learning. Many of our oldest myths are a way of teaching about the changing seasons. Yeah. In a couple of weeks' time, it'll be Yule, the winter solstice.
It will, 21st.
22nd this year, I think. And I expect we'll do a special for that. We usually do, don't we?
We do indeed.
Right, so Yule. According to Celtic mythology, once again, the Oak King will defeat his brother, the Holly King. Do those two kings really exist? Nah, of course not. But it's not a falsehood either. It's a third type of reality that expresses a deeper meaning. In this case, its deeper meaning is that days are getting longer and bringing new life to the earth, with the greenery symbolized by the Oak King.
Yeah.
A tree of summer. The Greeks express a similar idea with the myth of Demeter and Persephone. And again, we're not going to go too much into it because we'll be doing it on whenever the nearest date is to the 22nd. But Persephone is the daughter of the harvest goddess Demeter and the supreme god Zeus in Greek mythology. Originally, her name was Kori. It's quite common in mythology and in mystery schools for a new name to be taken after an initiation. In Celtic tradition, we learn of young Guillaume Bach, who becomes known as Taliesin after his initiatory experience with the 3 drops of Arwen from the cauldron of Ceridwen. So, Kori was out picking flowers when she caught the eye of Zeus and his brother Hades, god of the underworld. Hades became filled with lust, so he kidnapped her and later made her his wife. Kori was initially very upset about being kidnapped, as you can imagine, and some stories even have her raped, and she wished to return to her old life. Demeter was pretty pissed off and all, And so she threatened to make all of mankind starve until her daughter returned. Finally, Zeus had to go and sort things out with his brother. As Hades had given Corey 6 honey-coated pomegranate seeds to eat, he said that she must stay with him for 6 months of the year, but she could return to her mother and to Mount Olympus for the other 6 months. So for 6 months, Demeter was happy and the crops grew. And for 6 months, she was sad and everything died. And that explains the summer and the winter seasons.
Yeah.
As they would have been experienced in ancient Greece. It's a lovely story. It's not meant to be taken literally, any more than the Good Samaritan story was meant to be taken literally. It's just the way it goes.
It was a good idea to express being generous and kind to people.
Yeah, it's just a way of getting an idea across.
Yeah.
Getting a point across.
Yeah.
The Persephone myth explains the seasons. Right into the cycle of planting and harvest. There's so much in mythology around Yule from different countries around the winter solstice. And we'll be going a lot more into that in a couple of weeks.
We will indeed.
Throughout time and throughout the world, stories are told of great heroes being born on or around the winter solstice. Horus in Egypt, Apollo in Greece, Jesus in Israel, and many, many more. The Celts tell of Mabon ap Modron, son of the mother, the child of promise.
Yeah.
Reborn every year on or around the winter solstice. The phenomenon of cultural transmission sees travelers taking their mythological stories with them, and their new neighbors taking and adapting some of the stories, which is why we end up with lots of different versions.
Yeah.
And of course, some of these stories are very, very, very old, so they've morphed a little bit over time. Each new generation adding their extra little bit of meaning. Indeed, the stories about Horus and Mabon and baby Jesus have remarkable similarities. So what is mythology? Mythology is a genre of folklore that includes stories that explain natural phenomenon, the history and origin of the world, and important morality lessons. Essentially, myths are teaching aids. They often include adventures of gods and goddesses, deities of all types, heroes and heroines. And they also have religious significance. Of course, with the passage of time, there's been a merging between myths and actual historical accounts. It's often hard to know whether we're reading history or mythology.
Yeah.
An example of this is the exploits of the gods of ancient Sumer, the Anunnaki.
Yeah.
Which, as we discussed before on this show, may well have been flesh and blood space visitors. Another example in more recent times is the accounts of the life of King Arthur. Maybe he was a real king, or at least maybe a warlord.
Yeah.
And maybe he wasn't.
I think we talked about that, Jack, when we talked about Glastonbury and the Lost Lands, didn't we?
Yeah, we've talked about it before. Yeah. Or perhaps he was a real character whose story has been much embellished over the years. It's great to have stories of heroes to drive us to strive for our highest ideals.
Yeah.
I don't want to upset anybody's religious beliefs, but something similar could be said about the baby Jesus. In fact, the same thing could be said about Jesus. There may well have been an actual person who lived in Israel at that time and taught love and peace and the law of attraction. And there may have been several who got amalgamated over the years. The story of Jesus is also a story of rebellion. Jesus was a great rebel leader. If the mythological Jesus is based on more than one historical character, then it's highly possible that one of them could have survived long enough to have taken part in the rebellion that led to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, as some historians have suggested. Ralph Ellis in particular. The account of the birth of baby Jesus is so similar to the birth of Horus that it may be considered entirely mythological. Or maybe it wasn't. I'm only asking questions here, folks.
Yeah, of course.
Horus was born to the goddess Isis after she retrieved all the dismembered body parts of her murdered husband, Osiris.
Apart from the phallus.
Except his dick.
Indeed. I was kind of prettying it up by saying phallus.
You're more polite than me, young Annie.
Okay.
Which was thrown into the River Nile and eaten by a catfish.
Yeah.
Isis used her magical powers to resurrect Osiris and fashion a phallus for him, so as to conceive her son.
Indeed.
Now,
virgin birth, eh?
Yeah, so let's think about what that actually means. You know, we take these stories on face value, but myths aren't meant to be taken on face value. You've got to dig deep into them to find the hidden meanings.
Yeah.
And that's the wonder of mythology. You've really got to dig deep.
Why we're critical thinkers, it's why we're intelligent.
That's right, Annie. Hold that thought. Unfortunately, we're living in a world today where truthers, we call ourselves truthers, can see the evil deeds of the satanic cabal and jump to the conclusion that all things occult are evil. No, they're not.
No, they're not. It just means hidden occult.
Just means hidden, exactly. Yeah, on the Latin.
Yeah.
It's still the same word in modern Spanish.
Yeah. And Italian and Mexican.
Yeah. The occult is no more evil than electricity. You can either use the technology for good or for evil.
Yeah.
Evil magic is known as the left-hand path, while good magic is known as the right-hand path. Black magic or white magic. Believe me, magic is strong. And if we're going to defeat the satanic cabal, we're going to need some white magicians on our side.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we have some. They're called light workers.
Yep. That would be us.
That would be thee and me and Mark Barnabas. So what would an occultist make of the Isis and Horus story? Well, I mean, I could talk for hours and go into the many, many different depths of layers of this story, but just in a nutshell, yeah? So we don't go over time. Isis goes into ritual, or perhaps a deep meditation, a deep trance, where she visualizes the body of her dead husband being reassembled. Then she mates with him. On the objective plane, a high priest probably stood in for Osiris. But in her deep trance, she believed she was mating with Osiris. The child Horus was thus considered to be a son of God. That would certainly explain why it was considered in occult circles to have been a virgin birth.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking a question here, folks. Don't shoot me. Did something similar happen in the conception of Jesus? Did Mary conceive in ritual? Is that why he was considered a son of God? And that would certainly explain her virgin birth.
Yeah.
We've spoken before on this show about the Greenwood marriages at Beltane, and the babies conceived in the Greenwood marriages are considered children of God. Yeah.
And they're very mystical and magical children as well, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very magical thing to do.
Yeah.
So introducing Joseph Campbell, Professor of Literature at Sarah Lawrence College in America, and author of The Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Yeah.
He probably understood mythology better than anybody. Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell, Annie?
Yeah, and I've got quite a bit on it, so I'll aim not to repeat what you've just said.
No, I've got to try to be, I've got to start and look into the future, haven't I? And try not to say what you're going to say.
No, just go with what you've got and I'll edit from what I've written.
Campbell taught that myth has 4 basic functions: metaphysical or mystical, cosmological, sociological,
and pedagogical.
And pedagogical. I'm glad you pronounced it.
I knew that you would be pleased that I pronounced it. As I'm a teacher, I know a lot about pedagogical function.
Absolutely. It's all to do with teaching, isn't it? Its metaphysical function is to awaken us to the mystery and wonder of creation, to open our minds and our senses to an awareness of the mystical ground of being, the source of all phenomena. The cosmological function is to describe the shape of the cosmos, the universe, our total world, so that the cosmos and all contained within it become vivid and alive for us, infused with meaning and significance. Every rock, every hill, every stone, and every flower has its place and its meaning in the cosmological scheme which the myth provides. Its sociological function is to pass down the law, the moral and ethical codes for people of that culture to follow, and which helps define that culture and its prevailing social structure.
Yeah.
This is why multiculturalism doesn't work. It's, you can say it, Annie.
Pedagogical function.
It's pedagogical function, which means teaching, as Annie
Yes,
just told.
It does.
I always get hung up on these words. Is to lead us through particular rites of passage that define the various significant stages of our lives, from dependency to maturity to old age, and finally to our deaths, the final passage. The rites of passage bring us into harmony with the ground of being, a term often used by Joseph Campbell to refer to an unnamed, unspecified universal mystical power, and allow us to make the journey from one stage to another with a sense of comfort and purpose. The mystical experience, the core spiritual journey that envisions God, has always been a tough experience to communicate. Some would say it's impossible to communicate in plain language. That's why we have myths. Others would say that this is the primary function of myth, to find a way to communicate whatever mystical insights have been gained on the journey through life.
Yeah.
An understanding of the mysteries that underlie the universe, an appreciation of its wonders, a sense of awe and rapture experienced.
Oh, sounds lovely.
He did have some flowery words, that Campbell.
Oh, absolutely. I love people who are loquacious.
So these things can't be communicated by direct means, but myth speaks in a language of metaphors and symbols, symbolic narratives that aren't limited by objective reality. Some believe that the mystical experience is what gives birth to metaphorical language and metaphorical thinking. Others think it's magic mushrooms.
And cannabinoids.
In our post-Enlightenment Western world, we have decidedly turned to science to tell us what the shape of the world is.
Yeah, because that's all true, obviously, scientism.
But through quantum physics, scientists are at last starting to catch up with what occultists and mystics have known all along.
Do you want me to read what Barnabas has sent about the Shakespeare's 7 Ages of Man?
Well, I tell you what, Barnabas, can you read it with your wonderful, eloquent voice?
In that that old English from the north. Shakespeare's Seven Ages of Man. I've just looked it up on thoughtco.com. Infancy, schoolboy, teenager, youth, middle age, old age, and extreme old age.
Right, but there's a line from one of his plays, isn't there, that goes into it. Oh God, I can't remember. It's so long since I was at school.
Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Yeah, please, yeah.
And all the men and women, it's all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail, unwillingly at school, and then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow, then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honour, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth, and then the justice in fair round belly with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank and his big manly voice turned again towards childish treble pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends this strange, eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
That's the one. Thank you very much.
Barnabas.
Thank you, Barnabas. That was brilliant. Brilliantly read. So, myth describes the shape of the world and infuses each part of that world with meaning and significance. And though a mythic tale may seem superficially false, a closer inspection will be rewarded with a much deeper understanding. Campbell wrote a lot about archetypes, a concept often attributed to the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung, 1875 to 1961. But it was also written about by Russian scholar Vladimir Pop in his 1928 book, Mythology of Folklore. All the great heroes or character archetypes and events that happen throughout folklore follow a similar pattern, which Campbell called the hero's journey. So, what is the hero's journey? Basically, it's a 12-stage series of events that you can apply to almost any story that has a mythology of heroes, whether modern or ancient. Embedded deep in the human psyche lies the narrative of what Joseph Campbell called the hero's journey. This is more than just a mere mythological narrative. This is a deep truth that applies to every human story. This is a journey about self-discovery, living the fully realized life, or as Campbell would have put it, following your bliss. The hero's journey is an all-embracing metaphor for the deep inner journey of transformation that heroes in every time and place seem to share. It's a path that leads him or her through great moments of separation, descent, or death, and return. The hero comes full circle from the ordinary world to the special world and back again. The same narrative spans across all cultures, eras, and religions. We often think of ancient tales, but the same themes can be found in modern stories such as Star Wars or Harry Potter. Some journey stages may be avoided or repeated or moved around a bit. It all depends on the needs of the individual. The hero's journey can be just as much an inner voyage into the subconscious mind as it is an external adventure. There are a number of steps that a hero must go through for self-transformation. Typically, there are 12 steps that usually go in the following order. Not always 12, usually 12. Step 1. We all start in the ordinary, mundane world, where the hero is a lesser version of himself or herself in the beginning. You can think of the tarot card, the Fool, can't you?
Yeah.
Setting off with his bag over his shoulder, little dog yapping at his feet, about to step off a cliff. We live ordinary lives of quiet desperation. We do what our family, friends, and society tell us to do. This leads us into living a life that is not our own. But deep down, we know that there is more to life than working, paying taxes, doing housework, and retiring on a pension that we can hardly survive on. There has to be more to life. Deep inside us, we feel there is an exciting adventure waiting for us. In Star Wars, you see Luke Skywalker being bored to death as a farm boy before he enters his special world, in his case, space travel. This is a metaphor for stepping into chaos, stepping into uncertainty, the unknown, or as we might call it, into the unconscious. Step 2, the call to adventure. The call to adventure signifies that destiny has summoned the hero. As we go about our lives, we will encounter multiple calls to adventure. We will have opportunities to embark on a new quest, which will change everything we thought we knew about ourselves and the world. But are we brave enough to answer that call? If we are, we will be faced by difficult challenges. The challenge of letting go everything that we know. It's up to us whether or not we accept that call to step out of our comfort zone. Sadly, most of us will decline the offer. They live their
Not
lives.
all of us, Jack Cox.
Not all of us, any day.
Remember escaping from an abusive relationship? You and I both disclosed that we have completely been on our own hero's journey, and we have rebuilt our life completely from like the ground upwards, haven't we? So
that's right, Annie. Yeah, absolutely. We've done there. We've been there. We've done it. We've got the t-shirt.
Done our little hero's journey. I want the t-shirt for. I've done my hero's journey, and continue to do so. Bless.
So sadly, most people don't get past the stage. They live their life according to what is safe, never really chasing their dreams, because they would rather play it safe and stay in the illusion of certainty. And that's all it is, it's an illusion. This often leads them to feel unfulfilled and stagnant because they never accepted the call to adventure. Some of us, of course, don't get a choice. We get pushed into it. You couldn't have survived that marriage any longer.
No. I went at exactly the right time, as did you.
So, step 3 is the refusal of the call. The hero will almost always refuse the call, at least in the beginning, due to fears, insecurities, and the unwillingness to change. The hero's journey is just as much an inner leap of faith as an external adventure.
Oh, for sure.
It seems easier to avoid challenging issues.
And it's knowing at a profound level that when you step out of your comfort zone and walk off that cliff, that you will be supported by the universe, by God, whatever we're suggesting, you know, the creator is. It's knowing that when I step off this cliff, I'm going to be caught. I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to be protected. I'm going to be supported. And it's having that, I don't know, infinite inner knowing that that's the case.
I mean, I have every time as well. The universe has always been there as a safety net for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know, it's like this. It's like the fall is stepping off that cliff.
Yeah.
He can't actually see that he's stepping off a cliff, but if he could, would he have the faith just to do it and know that he'd be caught?
Mm.
So we don't do anything. And we live our lives wondering what could have been if only we'd shown some balls. Step 4 is the meeting the mentor. The hero encounters a mentor who gives him or her insights and guidance that will help him on his journey. In Lord of the Rings, the mentor was Gandalf.
Yeah.
Mentoring
Gandalf
Bilbo.
Grey. Yeah.
Mentoring Bilbo and later Frodo.
Yeah.
Both very, very reluctant heroes.
Yeah.
These days, thanks to the internet, meeting a mentor doesn't necessarily have to happen physically. Or even reading books can give you the push you need to get going.
Indeed.
Mentors come in many different shapes and forms.
Mm-hmm.
Step 5, crossing the first threshold. This is when the hero goes from the ordinary world to the special world. This is a metaphor for going into the subconscious or into the unknown externally. This is where the adventure of self-discovery truly begins. And it's the point of no return. After the hero crosses this first threshold, life will never, ever be the same again.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for that.
I was going to say, thank goodness for that. No need to repeat that lesson.
This is the stage where Neo takes the red pill and wakes up from the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
It may very be where some of you watch our show every week and wake up from the Matrix. Crossing the first threshold may involve beginning a new business or career, a new relationship, or moving to another country.
Or the whole caboodle.
Or the whole caboodle, all at once. Why not? Why not burn all your bridges?
Well, yeah. Leave the bridges behind that are broken.
Step 6. The hero learns the rules of this new world. Challenges, wars, or conflicts arrive. You meet new friends. You have new experiences, but you face more challenges. That's what makes it interesting.
Of course it does.
The most important function of this stage in the story is testing the hero to prepare him or her for the ordeals that lie ahead. Step 7, you approach the innermost cave. The innermost cave may represent many things in the hero's story, such as an actual location in which lies a terrible danger or an inner conflict, which up until now the hero hasn't faced. In many myths, the hero has to descend into the underworld or retreat into a cave to fight a demon or a dragon to receive the treasure.
And Louise Hay says that whenever we feel fearful about change, to remember that the only constant in the universe is change, and to affirm, everything's okay, this is only change. Everything is okay, this is only change. And then it just quiets us down so that we're more earthed and grounded.
That's very good. Yeah, absolutely. In mythology, the dragon represents our fears that are keeping us from our most precious treasure. It's only when we break through what we fear the most that we can receive the biggest rewards and growth. But it ain't easy. There's that song go. You know it ain't easy. It is at this stage in the hero's journey that the hero has to make a very tough decision. Right, step 8, the ordeal. Just because you've faced your fears and taken the plunge, don't expect everything is going to be plain sailing.
Yeah.
This is usually the biggest challenge the hero must face, such as hitting rock bottom. And we've done that a few times, haven't we?
And we always bounce back. Remember Weebles?
What?
Weebles wobble, but we don't fall down. Remember Oh, you faxed out.
No, I don't remember that. No.
But
No,
yeah,
okay.
there were Weebles, and however much you knock them about, they always bounce back up again because they've got a little magnet in the bottom of them. So yeah, we're Weebles. We wobble, but we don't fall down. Or we don't stay down, shall I say? We don't stay down.
Right, only through a form of death can the hero be reborn, experiencing a metaphorical resurrection that somehow grants him greater powers of insight necessary in order to fulfill his destiny. Step 9, the reward. After bravely facing the ordeal in the innermost cave, the hero receives his reward. Wait, blooming time and all. This could be a physical object, new love, or even knowledge or wisdom. The reward could be settling a conflict with a family member, or a shadow self, or even healing a trauma, which gives you such a better understanding of yourself, allowing you to live a much happier, more fulfilled life.
Indeed.
Step 10, the road back. The hero's not out of the woods yet. This stage marks that decision to return to the ordinary world. The hero realizes that the special world must eventually be left behind, and that there are still dangerous temptations and tests ahead. Now, this could be your shadow self coming up. Something lurking in your shadow coming up. Step 11, resurrection. During the resurrection, death and darkness are encountered once again before being conquered for good. There is danger, the threat to the hero's life, or even to the entire world. The stakes are high. The hero uses all the lessons learned on the journey and is transformed into a new being with new insights. Step 12, returning with the prize. Once the transformation is complete, the hero returns to the ordinary world with the treasure, new understanding. The hero can now implement change in his daily life. He can use the lessons of the adventure to heal his wounds and help others in the ordinary world. This is important because unless something is brought back from the ordeal in the innermost cave, the hero is doomed to repeat the adventure until the lesson is learned. I mean, no pressure or anything, But if you fail to bring home the prize or fail to even begin, a painful karmic cycle may be repeating. This may take many lifetimes to resolve. So whatever is calling you, begin it now and proceed fearlessly through all 12 steps. And don't give up at step 8, whatever you do. Expect setbacks. You can do this. Only your own fears can stop you. But love will give you strength. What do you think of that?
I think it's wonderful. And I
think
think that how I operate, or how I consistently operate, is to expect the best and prepare for the worst.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But by having that, knowing that whatever disaster comes up, there will be a massive blessing as well. So that's what keeps me relatively sane. I don't want to say completely sane, because I'd hate to be normal, whatever that might equate to.
Yeah. Right. What have you got for us, Annie?
Well, a lot of the stuff that you'd got, so I'll just not
Sorry.
repeat that. No, Jack, it's all good. So, mind-blowing myths and legends from around the world. So the Namazu believe there is an earth shaker that creates earthquakes, and that's Japan. Celestial footballers in Canada, dragons in China and Japan, changelings in Ireland, the Kraken in Scandinavia, Atlantis in Greece, the mermaids of the Klein Karoo in South Africa. So the epic myth of Gilgamesh, I'll make it as quick as possible. The epic myth of Gilgamesh is one of the most well-known Mesopotamian myths, and is often regarded as the oldest known piece of literature in the world. It was initially a number of individual short stories and was not combined into one cohesive epic until the 18th century. The story follows the Sumerian king Gilgamesh, typically regarded as a historical figure, and his good friend Enkidu, through various adventures and quests that eventually led to Enkidu's death. The second half of the epic deal with Gilgamesh, distressed about the death of his friend and his own impending mortality as he searches for immortality. In the end, he fails, but he comes to terms with the fact that he's eventually going to die and returns to his city of Uruk as a wiser king. Adapa, the earliest record of the myth of Adapa, is from the 14th century. Adapa was a Sumerian citizen who was blessed by the god Enki with immeasurable intelligence. However, one day Adapa was knocked into the sea by the south wind, and in a rage he broke the south wind's wings so that it could no longer blow. Adapa was summoned to be judged by An, and before he left, Enki warned him not to eat or drink anything that was offered to him. What could possibly go wrong with that? Because we can't process don't. So as soon as someone says, don't do that, you're like, straight away.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, when he realised just how smart Adapa was and offered him the food of immortality, which Adapa, dutiful to Enki, turned down, this story is used as an explanation for humankind's mortality, and it's associated with the fall of man narrative that is also present in Christianity. A modern understanding of Mesopotamian mythology has been provided through archaeological excavations of West Asia and the recovery of many stone and clay tablets, some of which contain records of these so-called myths. These myths are so near universal that their prevalence is very synchronistic. So these versions were written in different languages, including Akkadian, Sumerian, and Old Babylonian, and were often translated from one to another, leading to further inconsistencies due to the inherently imperfect nature of these translations. These myths are so near universal that their prevalence is very synchronistic. In most cultures, we have the myth of the Great Flood, paradise lost, epic cosmic battles, vampires, Atlantis, God's resurrection, dragons, and the hero's quest. So the idea of an unimaginable war that threatens to tear apart the cosmos, connects with us so deeply that it still powers our epic stories. For instance, as Jack's already mentioned, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Doctor Who, and countless others all feature this age-old story. It can be found in the legends of almost every ancient culture. Christianity has the battle between God and the rebel angels led by Satan. Ancient Greece had the story of the Titans taking on the gods of Mount Olympus. The Hindu tradition involves a dizzying series of battles so epic they would give us nightmares. There are a couple of ways at looking at this. One is to go down the Scientology route of claiming these legends are genetic memories of some apocalyptic battle that tore the galaxy apart billions of years ago. The other is to remember that most cultures throughout history have consistently been on the brink of war or prone to invasion, so an apocalyptic slaughter was probably never far from people's minds and fears. Either way, it suggests the human drive to war is universal. Vampires. Love vampires. If you hated the last couple of years of hormone-driven, angst-inspired vampire media, try living in medieval Europe. Back then, belief in vampire was so prevalent that barely a single country didn't consider them a terrifying fact of life. When crops failed or there was drought or a baby was born with a slight deformity, you'd better believe it that the vampires got the blame. A tradition that stretches back thousands of years. Undead bloodsuckers aren't a modern invention. They weren't even dreamt up this side of the Common Era. Cultures as mind-bendingly old as the ancient Egyptians believed wholeheartedly in their existence, while there were versions of them turning up everywhere from China to Tibet to India. Even the Persians of Mesopotamia had a selection of ferocious, blood-drinking demons to terrorize children, although they bore differences from our modern Anne Rice-inspired variety. Looked at rationally, it's easy to see how the vampire legend arose. Our fear of death crossed with a huge degree of medical ignorance. God's resurrection, Jesus' resurrection, is the big selling point of Christianity, some say, a unique moment that established Christ as the one true Saviour. In reality, the idea of a dying deity or important human who is later resurrected has been around for millennia. Most famously, this includes the story of Osiris, the ancient Egyptian gods whose birth was heralded by a star, who was betrayed by a friend, was murdered, and later resurrected. There are less explicit versions too. The Greek cult of Dionysus had their figurehead killed off every 2 years, only to rise again at a later date. Persephone also died regularly, and many pagan traditions from Scandinavia to Central America involve gods dying and returning to life, or men dying and coming back as deities. Perhaps most interestingly of all, a historical tablet known as Gabriel's Revelation allegedly tells the story of a Jewish rebel known as Simon, who was killed by the Romans only to be resurrected 3 days later. Dragons. We've also done a show on dragons, but we do love dragons.
We do love dragons, Annie.
Yeah, definitely. Dragons are likely the most travelled creature in all of mythology. Even more than vampires, they have a habit of turning up in societies and cultures so far apart in time and space that you would think it was impossible. There are ancient Sumerian tablets that record the act of dragon slaying, Greek tales of dragons cavorting with other monsters, and an entire science built around the uses of their bones in China. In Central America, the Mayans worshipped the feathered snake Quetzalcoatl, while both Norse and Christian mythologies specifically mention dragons. As late as 1886, Victorian scientists still held that dragons had once existed and gone extinct. And then we had the heliocentric dinosaur myth that dinosaurs were established in the public mind. Did people see what they presume was a probable link between ancient fossils and dragon myths? However, I believe that dragons did exist, not least that in the Chinese New Year calendar, all the creatures for every single year are real creatures, and they also show dragons, which they believe and believed are real creatures. Thanks to the occasional movie adaptation, most of us probably have a vague knowledge of the poems of Homer. His Iliad and Odyssey are epic myths of tortured heroes fighting their way across oceans and continents in search of metaphorical salvation. It's called the hero's journey again. And just about all epic stories throughout history have followed this specific model.
Yeah.
Famously, George Lucas deliberately based the first Star Wars on it, and you can find its influence, as we've said earlier, in The Lord of the Rings, the Oz books, and Harry Potter. This archetypal myth was around even before anthropologists handed it over to script writers. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Sinbad the Sailor in the 100,000 Nights, the legend of King Arthur, the tale of the Argonauts, all of these and plenty more fit the structure of that hero's journey, just like Homer's awesome poems. In fact, nearly every single culture in recorded history has myths that fall into this category, and Moses' epic wanderings in the Bible also fit this model. Apocalypse. Everything that begins has an end, and our ancient ancestors knew that simply as we do. No surprise then that most cultures carry an end of times myth to encounter their creation story. For Christians, this apocalypse is a gigantic epic that plays out over many, many years and involves so many disasters, wars, and calamities. The same with the Norse Ragnarok, which is a collection of disasters and battles that results in the earth being drowned and recreated afresh. In Hinduism, it's another epic battle followed by a rebooted universe, while Buddhism annihilates the world in a pyrotechnic firework display.
Sounds like fun.
It does, doesn't it? In other words, most humans throughout history have lived with their own personal vision of the end of everything, one that makes sense in the context of their lives and culture. So, a few mythologies: Hindu, Roman, Greek, Manipuri, Norse, Japanese, Anglo-Saxon, Etruscan, Chinese, Maori, Native American, Australian Aboriginal, Celtic, Iranian, Korean, Slavic, Armenian, African, Polynesian, Inuit, Babylonian, Sumerian, Egyptian, Mayan, Aztec, Inca. So all of them have quite extraordinary myths for how people could live their lives. And they've all got, as in the parables, sort of moral to the stories, a sort of Aesop's fable of what the ways are that we should behave, basically. So, Hindu mythology, before time began, there was no heaven, no earth, and no space in between, Hindus believe. A vast dark ocean washed upon the shores of nothingness and licked the edges of the night. A giant cobra floated on the waters, and asleep within its endless coils lay the Lord Vishnu. He was watched over by the mighty serpent. Everything was silent and peaceful. That Vishnu slept undisturbed. From the depths, the humming sound began to tremble. It grew and spread, filling the emptiness and throbbing with energy. The night ended and Vishnu awoke. As the dawn began to break, from Vishnu's navel grew a magnificent lotus flower. In the middle of the blossom sat Vishnu's servant Brahma, and he patiently waited for his Lord's command until he said, "Create the world." Sekhmet, the lioness. Sekhmet is the fiercest hunter of Egypt. Her name came from the word Sekhem, which means power. And her name also means the one who is powerful. She is usually represented as a woman with the head of a lioness. Sometimes she is naked. She always wears the solar disc, the pharaonic headdress which associates her with Wadjet, the cobra goddess. Sekhmet was considered a warrior goddess and a great goddess of healing for Upper Egypt, in which she was the patron of physicians and healers. Her priestesses were considered to be skilled doctors and healers. She would be invoked to fight against the demons of plague and disease, but people believed also that she could send demons, but only to her enemies. So it was all good. Hester the Virgin. Her myth says that she's the sister of Zeus. She's worshipped as the goddess of cooking, hearth, and architecture. It was said that in every household, the first offering was to be on her name by Zeus' command. It is said she gave her place among the Olympians to Dionysus to stop a confrontation, and for this gesture, Zeus gave her the keys to Mount Olympus, making her the manager of this place. She was in charge of all the weapons for the gods and to take care of all the businesses that happened there. There's a lot on mother goddesses, all sorts of lovely, lovely things. The Bakuba creation. This myth says that darkness was over the earth, which was nothing but water, and Muboba, the white giant, ruled over this chaos. One day, he felt a terrible pain in his stomach and vomited the sun, the moon, and the stars. I don't know if I like the sound of that too much, really.
No.
The sun shone fiercely and the water steamed up into the clouds, creating dry land. Mabobo felt sick one more time, vomiting again. This time trees came out of his stomach. Also animals, people, the first man and woman, the leopard, the eagle, the falling star, the anvil, the monkey, the firmament, medicine, lightning, and many other things. So Rainbow Crow is the last one I'm going to talk about. So Rainbow Crow was asked by the creator to trust. You will not freeze, the creator said, then stuck a stick into the blazing hot sun. The end blazed with a bright glowing fire which burned and gave off heat. This is fire, he told Rainbow Crow, handing him the cool end of the stick. You must hurry to earth as fast as you can fly before this stick burns up. Rainbow Crow nodded his thanks to the creator and flew as fast as he could go. The stick was large and heavy, but the fire kept Rainbow Crow warm as he descended from heaven down to the bright path of the stars. Then the fire grew hot as it came closer to Rainbow Crow's feathers. As he flew past the sun, his tail caught on fire, turning the shimmering, beautiful feathers black. By the time he flew past the moon, his whole body was black with soot from the hot fire. And when he plunged into the sky and flew through the clouds, the smoke got into his throat, strangling his beautiful singing voice. By the time that Rainbow Crow landed among the freezing cold animals of earth, he was black as tar and could only caw instead of singing. We know that sound. Do not be sad, Rainbow Crow, the Creator said. All animals will honor you for the sacrifices you have made for them. And when the people come, they will not hunt you, for I've made your flesh taste of smoke, so that it is no good to eat. And your black feathers and hoarse voice will prevent man from putting you into a cage to sing for him. You will be free, the Creator said. And then he pointed to the Rainbow Crow's black feathers, and before his eyes, Rainbow Crow saw the dull feathers become shiny and black. Inside each one, he could see all the colours of the rainbow. This will remind everyone who sees you of the service you have been to your people and the sacrifice you made that saved them all.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for all that, Annie. I can see you were struggling a bit trying to get through it. All right, Barnabas, have you got any questions or comments or information for us or anything?
I was just wondering about what you said about there was something earlier. The hero's journey. Where did you get it from? Where is that a document that you've found online? Because I've heard something similar recently, and I can't remember where I got it from. But
Well, originally it's from Joseph Campbell's.
it's Joseph Campbell's book. Yeah.
Yeah. Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Right. Because it really is the story of every life.
Yeah.
And we have our own journey. We believe that we have the way, you know, the thing that we're doing together with Catherine and Karen and a few others. We believe the way is something for each of us individually. It's not the way, as in the definitive article that everybody's got to follow this way, but we all have our own journey through life to make. So we call it the way, find yours. So it's like the discovery of our own hero's journey, and then having support from others who might not agree with everything that we say and believe, but they are there to support us, to help us to walk the path that we choose to walk. And that way it works, because unfortunately what's happened through human history is we all get quite precious about our own theory of how to live the human life. And if people disagree with us, we even go to war with them, saying that we're right, you're wrong, and we'll soon find out, because the history is always written by the victors. So if we beat you up, then we're right, definitely, from a historical point of view, because all the manuscripts are going to reflect what we say rather than what you say. So the entire opposite way round for that is to say, this is my journey, this is the way that I'm walking. How are you walking? What's your journey involved? And rather than I misread somebody's actions, and I reflected it back to them, trying to make friendship with them, and they said, "Oh, I don't believe any of that. What I believe is this, and this." And I just immediately, this is on Saturday evening, I said, well, you do that, and you do that extremely well. I thought, I'm taking the argument out of this. There isn't an argument as far as I'm concerned. I'm the one that's misunderstood what this person was originally saying. So I'm the one that's bad here. So rather than say, well, I thought you believe this and I thought you believe that. And that's why I said, what, you know, trying to get confrontational about it, rather than that, say, yes, you know, when you've explained yourself, this is my journey, this is the way that I'm walking my life, then to reflect that back and say, you're doing that really well. And they do, that the individual I'm speaking about here does it extremely well. So as usual with these Monday nights, my own culture, my own the way that I was brought up and the way that I started early adulthood was within the Christian church.
Yeah.
And so there's still a part of me that resonates with that. It's you can take the man out of the church, but you can't take the church out of the man, or is it the other way around? I can't remember. But the fact remains that a lot of the things that are said here jar against that kind of thought processes, and I can still remember those thought processes myself, you know, and the fact that I've moved away from them is my journey, but I do know the context of what's being spoken about, and yeah, just I was thinking about Joseph. I mean, the story of Joseph. His brothers sold him into slavery. They thought he was a pompous ass because he had this special coat that his dad had given him, saying he was the favorite. You shouldn't have a favorite child. But Jacob had made a big deal about Joseph and his because he was the son of the one true love of his life, and he was tricked out of marrying this lady. Is it Rachel or Rebecca? I forget. But anyway, that the Joseph's mum was really the love of Jacob's life, and so he gave him all this stuff, but it worked against the lad because he ended up being taken off into Egypt. But the hero's journey, he becomes second lieutenant to the Pharaoh. So when they all come in the famine asking for food, they don't even know who he is. And he does a setup with his only blood brother Benjamin, and says, "Well, he's stolen this golden cup from me." And they say he wouldn't do a thing like that, and they defend him. And it's obvious to Joseph that their hearts have changed, and then Jacob comes to Egypt, and it's all lovely at the end. But that is the hero's journey. And
Exactly
I had a Thompson reference Bible, and it did a sort of Jesus and Joseph story side by side, and it gave you sort of the depth, going into the depths and then coming back out again. It was quite an interesting thing, but it's basically what Joseph Campbell, is it? Yeah. Joseph Campbell said it's the hero's story. And so whether you go to the Christian mythology, or whether you go to any of these others that Annie's just been listing one after the other, it doesn't really matter. The hero's journey is the journey of all of our lives. And it's entirely up to us how far we go down that path. And if we can find people who are willing to support us without necessarily agreeing with us about everything, then that's a beautiful life. It's the best life to have. But once again, thank you for this show. This is amazing. Week by week by week, there's always something wonderful that I learn as a result of this. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you very much, Barnabas. Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Annie, for being a wonderful co-host and presenting loads of wonderful material, and for your contributions too, Barnabas. Right. Until next week. Namaste.
Namaste.